Hello, this is Sol Luckman on Sol Luckman Uncensored, and I am pleased, thrilled, honored today to have my friend and colleague Dawn Lester on the show with me. Hello there, Dawn.
Hi, Sol. Thank you for inviting me. It's good to have another conversation with you.
Absolutely. We spoke a couple of years ago, if I am not
Mm.
mistaken, during the thick of it, as it were.
Hmm.
And you may or may not have heard of Dawn's work that she co-authored with David Parker. What really makes you ill? Is that what it is? What really
Yes.
makes you ill? Which is a wonderful, wonderful book. And if you haven't heard of it, you've probably been under a rock or you've not been looking at some of these issues because it's a very popular, sometimes controversial, but always thought-provoking book that has sparked many, many, many conversations over the last, what, 3 years? Has it been 3 years since it's been out?
Five.
Five? No, it's not possible.
Yes,
That's
yes, it was.
true. God.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That makes more sense.
Christmas Eve 2019, just before the
That's
2020.
right. We were both cooking on books, right? Right. That were applicable to the pandemic right before it happened. And then
Mm,
everything kind of exploded. I had a fictional book, Cali the Destroyer, and you guys had What Really Makes You Ill. And they were both about this, essentially about this scenario. Mine actually fictionalized it, and yours questioned the premises of of what went down if people are in the know. We're not going to get into that. This is going on YouTube, so we're going to
mm,
tread lightly around topics having to do with critters and illness, but and
mm.
actually our goal today, just so you know out there, is to have a kind of conversation between authors and creatives and just let people into our worlds a little bit, what we're both working on. We're going to see if we have common ground and what's going on. I know that we do in some ways because Dawn and I have corresponded a fair amount over the last several years. So there's a lot more to her and her work than just this one book, believe me. And so we're going to talk more about that. So without further ado, Dawn, what have you got going on these days? I know, I've seen you in a lot of interviews. I know that you had you took part in a longevity type of workshop, or you were writing about that, the 55 plus thing over on Substacks. You are at okay. Before we go there, dawnlester.substack.com. Please go subscribe like immediately so that you don't forget because it's a wonderful window into her evolving world.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. I've called it Dawn's Writings. To well, to show that it's more than the health topics really that I cover. And I will say another huge thank you to you, Sol, for introducing me to Substack. That is almost 3 years ago now. It's just amazing. And I so appreciate it because it's allowed me to explore lots of different topics, generally health related, but to be able to expand on what is put out in the mainstream. And again, I'm being careful here to um, to help people see some of the information that they won't generally get through the mainstream. So it's my ethos is really to help people, to provide people with as much information as possible so they can make informed decisions and choices. So, to provide them with some of the other aspects that aren't covered. And that's due to the many years of research that went into what really makes you ill. But I am not totally on just the health. I am expanding into other areas, although half a foot is, you know, often in the health side of things because there's so much going on. I mean, so yeah, they are health related in, but to looking at the somewhat bigger picture in some cases.
Yeah, one of the things I've liked about your writing just over the years is just taking what has a subject, pick a subject in the health and alternative health field, and it's probably got a lot of dogma attached to it at this point in time because of the way things work. And I have my own theories on why that's the case. But you do this marvelous job over and over again of taking a topic that a lot of people would just think is just settled science, right? Or it's just the reality of things, the truth, the nature of things, the laws of the universe, who knows what, and just asking questions about it. And slowly the threads of that narrative that you're examining begin to unravel. It's a very, there is a lot of finesse in the dance that you dance with your approach to these topics because you're not super overbearing. But by the end of an article, you know, if you're not asking a lot of questions as a reader, then, you're just kind of tone deaf to what you're doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that because that is my objective. I know a lot of people say, oh, there's not so much critical thinking going on. I think I started with, when I originally started writing my Substack articles from a perspective of giving information or providing information. And I've adapted and developed my style, which of course, that's inevitable, to the point where I am asking questions. I'm posing, I'm putting information and saying, asking people to think about it. So yes, it is to ask the questions and to really hope that people engage and think about it. And I'm getting feedback that that is working. And going back to like you mentioned, the longevity thing, that's a good friend of mine, Adrian. He's running that workshop. But
So
I'm sharing it because
you were sharing that on your Substack, but
yes, that's the latest
you
one.
weren't involved directly in the.
Not directly. I really support his work because of what he's doing in terms of helping. There's a general view of, well, you just deteriorate with age, and that's not inevitable. And it's what he's doing is really helping. I mean, it's aimed at people 55 and over. Originally, it was men. Now it's men and women. So not
Yeah,
just men.
I'm
So,
glad to hear that.
well, because I mean, women are, and this is not sexist, this is not at all. Women tend to be more inclined to follow these, to be more health conscious, maybe, but that's maybe not true. There's a lot of the mix between the masculine and feminine, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
problems and a lot of ways that the men are being not appreciated, and so there's all sorts of ways where older men are getting into sort of certain habits maybe, and it's not inevitable that people deteriorate. We don't have to deteriorate, and
Mhm.
his approach is not just the physical health as in diet and exercise. It is the mental aspect as well, the mental, emotional and spiritual, and that's really where I feel an awful lot of um, these health systems or whatever are missing out, because that's a hugely important aspect of it. And because he's covering that, and as I say, he's a good friend of mine, that I am aware of what he's putting into his work and this workshop, that I
Can
fully
I just turn
supported.
people on to your blog post from today? It's Vitality Reborn webinar encore for men and women 55 plus. So that's the newest article on your Substack.
That is, yes. And yes, with some of the other articles, that's slightly health related, but I've been looking at the assisted dying legislation.
I saw that.
Mm,
That's a thorny topic.
yes, and I almost shied away from it at the beginning because I knew it was huge, but when I looked at it, I thought, no, there's a piece of the puzzle that is not part of it. And again, it's the usual thing of the false dichotomy. It's well, it's either assisted dying or no, we need better palliative care. And because of my understanding of how the system works, there are pieces of that are missing. So again, I'm tailoring my language here to be careful. So really to put the to put some other jigsaw pieces so people can see that it's not necessarily as clear cut, and also that the legislation is likely to be moving in a certain direction that is not obvious from the way it's portrayed, which is often the case with all of these things.
Mm,
So yeah,
mhm.
and another of my articles, which I remember you were very kind about, was the one about divide and conquer,
Oh,
and
yes.
just how so many people are falling for that, which is sad.
I was really glad to see you um, actually go there because that's been a drum that I've been beating for a while is that, regardless of which side you align with, if you align with a side in many of these debates that we've been having, a critical thing to realize is that the debate itself is rarely productive and it's usually harmful. And I believe it drains our energy, it drains our consciousness, it takes us very far away from creating new outcomes and alternative structures and scenarios, and all of that I suggest is by design, and that's a topic I get into in my new book, uh, pretty hot and heavy. That there's something more going on here. It's purposely dividing and conquering the people. It's a function of the construct that we're in, as as we
Yes.
interact with it, as we choose to interact. Many times or often unconsciously choose to interact, if I can even use that kind of oxymoronic language. But we feel like we're making choices, but they're not always the choices that we think we're making. Does that make any sense?
Yes, yes, absolutely, and that's um, part of what I'm aiming with my work. Again, which is why I just loved your book, because so much of it is like, yes, it's really helping people see how they're being drawn into thinking about things in a way that is not necessarily helpful and productive. I mean, it's not productive because that's the point of divide and conquer. I mean, I know it's just sharing my thoughts is that it's to get people arguing about things that aren't necessarily relevant, and to get people to take sides, so you continually get this conflict. And we've seen there's conflict everywhere and in almost every topic, which is why the division, men, women, right, left, whatever it is to get people divided and arguing because there's a right side and a wrong side. And that's all part of the conditioning from a very young age of, and certainly within the school system of, well, you're either right or you're wrong. And if one person's right, then the other one, by definition, is theoretically wrong. And nobody likes to be wrong because, if you make a mistake, like you get this thing from school, it's like, oh, I made a mistake, you get a big red cross. And it's like, oh, I don't want a red, and so, and interestingly, Red Cross is supposed to be the helpful, it's supposed to be the helpful organization. So it's very interesting. And again, with the language part of it, and when as authors, as writers, create with the creative word or creating with words, it's being careful about the words that we're using to make sure we're not, I mean, for me, to make sure I'm not drawing people into a particular way, that's a distraction, is to be open with the words, and not buying into systems. Although, I mean, even just using language, there certain aspects that we know the words have been created specifically. And I mean, the obvious one is just spelling. I mean, that's just amazing when you think
Right,
about it.
right.
It's like
Yeah.
casting spells. At the same time, it doesn't mean that that's a bad thing, because with our writing, as with your writing, you are casting spells to help people out of where they may be stuck in their conditioning. And that's where what I'm trying to do with my writing, to help people become unstuck, to see where they're, when I say stuck, I mean, within that kind of narrowed view, to open people up to see how they're being conditioned. Because until you are aware, you can't change things. So, and I know that well, I mean, it's not for me to say what I know, but I get that impression that's your idea as well, to draw people out of this being stuck, like you say, in the construct, like in the condition, whatever the words we choose, in the matrix, and again, choosing different words. But it is really to help people come out of that. A lot of people think they're awake truthers, and again, this is not to sound condescending, because these things are always layered, and some people get to a couple of the layers of, you know, a couple of layers down the rabbit hole, if you like, and then think they're there. And there are always other layers, and there's new information to look into. So it's an ongoing journey, and people who say, they get to that point and think they're there, you know, oh, I know the truth. Well, what is the truth? Is there the truth? Yeah, these things are open for, I won't say debate, because I don't like debate either, but discussion, for conversation, and to have conversations that are open. So it's to help people open up and have true conversations. It's like, if you say something, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. It doesn't mean I'm going to agree with you. It's just, I'm opening up to a new perspective that I hadn't thought of before. So yeah, that's gone all over the place. I wasn't sure where. Yes, okay. If that.
Oh, it's good. It's really good. Yeah, I mean, my synapses are firing away as you bring up various topics that I've been very interested in for a while. Um, I think the for me the biggest frontier in my way of looking at the world has involved my way of looking at the world. It's interesting,
Mm.
because what's been happening with me is I've been actually experiencing the things I write about and Get Out of Here Alive, which have to do with you begin kind of focusing on something and the construct, rather than being just some kind of materialistic world that we inhabit. It's actually more like a a dynamic dreaming response system to your impulses, right? And it gives you back what you're looking for in a way. And so, I've been really into the idea, as I'm sure you're aware from my latest book and even some of my earlier ones, that we're really hard pressed to nail down anything resembling truth or facts in a place where we can't even be assured of our own existence, of our own reality. So, there's a deep level of kind of skepticism in my work having to do with the nature of knowledge, with ontology, with being and epistemology. And so, the whole idea of knowing, so knowing and being. Um, and what's been happening is on Substack, because I've been writing about this and thinking about this and kind of looking for other people doing similar things, they've been showing up. Of course they would. It's just natural. So there's a wonderful writer named Dea DeVitas, who's shown up on in my orbit. Angela Morris, April Navoa, someone named Mark Emery Davy, who wrote this fascinating article about me based called Brother from Another Fractal recently. It was really, really wild. And he's into creating this new quote unquote reality model, which actually gets down into the functionality of how the kind of mycelium of the field of awareness interacts with us on a macro micro level, and how we actually can imprint the field with our intentions, with our words, with our spell casting, right? So we cast the spell into the field, and it gives back to us the fruit of that interaction, essentially. And you can look at this, I believe you can look at this epigenetically, for example. I believe this is actually how epigenetics works. With our intentions, our actions, our positivity or negativity, we feed into the field information, and then it gives back to us outcomes based on that information. And so if it's like a positive thing that we're putting into the field in terms of our health, for example, we often get positive health outcomes.
Yes, I would agree, and there's scientific evidence to back that up. I mean, if you go back to the work of Bruce Lipton, the biology of belief, and also if you look at the placebo nocebo effect, particularly the nocebo effect, which is less well known, and I think even calling them placebo nocebo effect is diminishing
It is
its
diminishing it.
power. It's
Absolutely.
yeah, it's oh well, it's an effect, like they say, oh well, side effect. I mean, no, um, it it is the creative power, if you like, that we are creating our own experiences. And in terms of truth, we can only know what is true for each of us. And that can change because our experiences change. So, I mean, again, I was having this conversation recently about, well, truth is not necessarily static. It's what is true in this moment because we have different experiences as we go through our in individual moments in each of our now moments, because what we experience only experiences now. And um, the idea that a someone is right and somebody else is wrong. Well, you have to look at their belief systems, their biases, their prejudices, and everything. All their conditioning, and then you'll see why each one has the experiences that they have. I mean, I don't know where you are on the idea that we actually choose at another level to have the experiences that we have during this life, that this what appears to be physical life, which is not. I mean, it is real in as much as everything is real. Like dreams are as real as our physical experience. So, I mean, what are your views on the idea that there's a choice at another level to have this particular experience?
My understanding or my understanding of that has, I don't know if I would call it evolved. It has certainly changed over time, transmuted at times, I suppose. Where I am now is that in my kind of mishmash of looking at things from all kinds of different perspectives, looking at them in a multidisciplinary way, in a multicultural, a transhistorical way, I feel that there's some kind of oversoul that is the guiding intelligence at the center of whatever this world is, whatever the multiverse is, right? There's something at the center. If you want to take a traditional astrophysics model, that would be the center of the galaxy, galactic center. That's what is known as the black sun in a lot of esoteric traditions. That is the central sun, the great central sun, the eagle in shamanic traditions. There's just tons and tons and tons of names for this thing. It's God, it's source, it's all the creator, it's all of these things, right? So that that being is wanting to have the experience of newness, of novelty, of diversity. And so it sends packets of information into the manifest world, into the tonal, the first attention, whatever you want to call this place, space time as opposed to time space. And those things manifest as a child. So that's you. That's how you get here. Most people think you're being reincarnated or your soul has been created and it's being stuck in here, right? So that those are the two options in the kind of divide and conquer game that we get unless you want to put the third option of atheism in there. So in any case, when that occurs, in my view, you're neither reincarnating nor are you a soul when you show up. You are an energy packet that is designed to develop into a soul and have novel experiences here. John Keats wrote about this as the veil of soul making. And his contention, and he was writing about this when he was on his practically on his deathbed. He said that, essentially we don't come here as souls. We're not, ergo, we're not really reincarnating here, nor are we an eternal soul in the Christian sense. This is a crucible, and we are forged by the refiner's fire here in this place into souls if we can withstand the heat.
Okay, interesting. Um, I, yes, again, we can get caught up in all sorts of language. So I know there are different ideas as to when the soul enters the body, and I know there are a few different ideas about that. And depending on what the interpretation of the soul is, I'm certainly with you in the idea that there is I don't want to use the word creator, and that's not, against what you've just said, but I mean, there are various different words. I just think using the word creator makes it appear as if it's a being, whereas I and I don't use God either. So I use the like the divine, because that's less likely to sound like a being, if you like. The source of all creation is, or the source of everything. The divine is the source of everything. So there is uh, an ultimate ground of all, if you like, ground of everything that creates everything for the opportunities, like you said, to have experiences, and that's why each one of us is unique. Um, Even, I mean, it's been proven, even twins are not exactly the same. Even identical twins, there are differences. They may have many similarities. They are not exact copies. So which is fascinating.
The
And
question
again,
would be back to the field and our interaction with the field. Like, is it because they have a different soul coming in, or do they have a different energetic and epigenetic relationship with the field that's feeding back to them different experiences that they're interpreting and processing differently? Is their mind simply different because they've used the in this model where the mind is kind of like in the field somewhere? It's the morphic resonance,
mm,
that kind of the mind in my model. Are they just cultivating a different mind as they have different life experiences? And that different mind would be play a role in the kind of soul they're creating for themselves here. And so
oh,
of course
yeah,
they would be different in that way of looking at things.
yes, and uh, from where I am at the moment, it's similar. Maybe some of the languaging is slightly different. In terms of the divine, wanting to have new experiences, what would be the point of an exact duplication?
Exactly. Exactly.
So the differences may be subtle. Because I was having a conversation about this some while ago, and again talking about how do we know if something affects us in terms, something we're doing, maybe something we're doing taking for our health, for example. And the only way to know would be, I said, would be, well, if you clone yourself and one does it and one doesn't, and um, so that would be the only way, because no two people are the same, so you can't have somebody else as the control, because they're just not the same. So to clone ourselves, and then that would be a direct comparison. Um, and it was it was then said, well, yes, but the moment of cloning, that's somebody different, and so it's never, you as not taking it, so it's never complete control, if you like, which I thought was yeah, again,
Did,
looking at
did,
things differently.
did you ever
So
watch Battlestar Galactica back in the early aughts? It was the remake of the old sci-fi show. So in 2004, they remade it, and it was 4 seasons. Battlestar Galactica. The race of
Possibly I
being.
may have seen, I mean, it rings a bell, but I can't remember any of the details. I may have seen something. So yes,
Well, it
please
really speaks to
explore.
what you were saying, because you have this race of machines who were created by people who basically gain some level of sentience, and that evolves over time, and they're able to clone or copy themselves. So you might have one face on, 1,000 Cylons, right? And in theory, you think they would all be the same, and that's how the humans first encountering them, interpret them, and then they realize actually they're all completely different. And I'm not completely, but so different that it's remarkable over and over and over again. Like there's something else going on that's way past biology, way past any kind of genetics or heredity or cloning that is going on here.
Yeah, yes, and that to me is the nature of consciousness. Although I would say, and again, that's something I've written about in terms of AI or technology or robots or machines. Um, there is no way that they would become conscious. They can be programmed, but they can only. I don't see how a machine can ever be more than the information that's put in. They can process, um, but I don't know that they can be ever original in the same way as that AI cannot create something original.
Now, I write about that in this new book as well, and I agree with you absolutely that especially the way AI is currently being created, there's no room in it for the kind of novelty that we're talking about. Now, and so within these frameworks, like large language models and that kind of thing, you're never going to see genuine intelligence. It is a kind of artificial, mimetic intelligence, quote unquote, or just a feedback mechanism of sorts, and an information processor, and it can do certain things very, very well. But in terms of that genuine soul spark of creativity, I don't think this current technology could deliver that. Now, I'm not going to put limitations on the source of all of this and say that it couldn't happen with some other system, that there couldn't be some way of generating a kind of intuitive intelligence that would operate with a different operating system. I don't know whether that would be possible. I'm not even sure what it would look like, but I'm not going to say it's impossible because I don't know. I really don't know. There's many things that I just have to wonder at, and I guess part of me believes so strongly in the creative dreaming power of people, is that if enough people could envision something like what I'm talking about, they could probably make it happen because we're basically gods of the imagination and training. So we can
Yeah.
create a sci-fi reality, is what I'm getting at.
Uh, yes, and at the same time, being the creator, I don't see how whatever we create can exceed what we can do, or possibly even match it. I don't know. And yes, I mean, and that was again so many parts of your book, which is, it's like yes, yes, and as I was reading that, it's like, yes, and that's part of it. And I'm not placing limitations. I'm not convinced that machines can do that. And again, that's well, certainly not what they're doing. And again, that's something else I've written about with AI, because it's being suggested that it could be used within healthcare systems, and I'm pointing out the problems with those ideas,
Mhm.
and like you say, certainly with where things are. I mean, definitely they can, AI can process things more quickly, access whatever it is. In terms of diagnosis, yeah, no, because it's it's starting from the wrong place,
Yeah,
so
that's a frightening prospect for one who is like myself, who went through illness and got so misdiagnosed and undiagnosed and all these things for so long. And I think there is not just a science, but a profound art to diagnosis. I think diagnosis is also a very slippery slope. There's a lot of things that people suffer from that can be addressed by lifestyle changes and other things that they would be much better off if they never had any diagnosis whatsoever and they simply made positive changes in certain areas. Do you agree with that? Because the
oh,
diagnosis is like spell casting. Suddenly you've got this thing.
totally, totally, and that's where I jump in. It's a sort of red rag to a bull really with the diagnosis, because that's the point I was making, that these are labels, these are spells that are cast. The term medical hexing has even been used. That it's and many people I know and I understand have feel a great sense of relief when they receive that, as, oh, now I know what's wrong with me. And again, that's part of the problem, thinking there's something wrong, but knowing that you're not functioning fully, knowing that sense that you're not doing what you can, or that you're not thinking clearly, whatever it is, your body's not working properly. And that is the idea that there's something wrong. So you get a label, oh, now I know what's wrong with me. And they attach that, as you say, the spell casting, and they take it on, and all sorts of problems can ensue from all of that, because they'll accept whatever the authority system tells them. But that isn't healthcare. And so yes, absolutely, with these labels, which is why I went into the assisted dying, because of that, because they've got to have certain labels and be terminal, that kind of thing, for this to actually be effective. But of course, there's still that spell casting, because even people who have had that label of again, air quotes, terminal, have been able to turn things around and recover and live, you know,
Right. Right. Literally,
quite long.
the system is requiring a death sentence in in
Yes.
the spell casting way. And if you want to just get really kind of skeptical and snarky about it, it's, you know, they're putting the nail in the coffin as fast as they can in these situations.
You mean the medical system?
Right.
Oh, yes,
That
yes,
entire
yes, totally,
series
yes.
of requirements from the perspective of this conversation is highly dubious in its intentions. Even if one is okay with people making their own choices and that kind of thing, which I personally am, but the system itself, if you look at it from a slightly less than trusting perspective, as many of us do look at things these days from lots of wild experience over the last several years, it just looks, I can't help but smell a rat in the way all of that is designed. And your writing on this subject was certainly helpful in unpacking some of these notions.
Yes, and it takes people down the wrong path. I would say wrong again, subjective. It's a lot of what's going on is about whether we comply with other authorities, or whether we take responsibility for ourselves. It's about um, making choices, being accountable for our own actions, and not just saying, oh, well, somebody else told me to do it, because that takes people down all sorts of paths. To take responsibility, and as you say, with um, lifestyle changes, yes, and there are people who've had near-death experiences and have come back and recovered. I mean, the very poignant case of Anita Murjani, who was very close to actually dying, and had her near-death experience. I mean, she would certainly have been, she certainly was classed as terminal, but she returned and healed. Her body healed pretty quickly, and she's alive and well and carrying on. So I like pointing out extreme examples like that, because it shows that terminal may not exactly mean what it means, what it's believed to mean, what it's said to mean. And it is about whether people are prepared to do something about it. And yes, quite often, I know with my own experience, I'm not sure I saw it as a wake-up call at the time, but I knew there was something going on for me, when I had my diagnosis and went through the treatment and everything. But I, I now see that it was an opportunity for me to make changes in my life, and I wouldn't be where I am now if I hadn't made those changes. So that it's what we do with these opportunities, and whether we fall into just, well, there's nothing I can do, and then and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, of course. And quite often with these prognoses, they become self-fulfilling prophecies, because of, like the bone pointing, the voodoo death, like, Walter Cannon wrote about, not
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
1942, talking about how people were cursed, and they died. Yeah, absolutely. As I say, it's a well-known phenomenon. It's yeah, like it's that, like we were saying before, like you said, that it is definitely more than just the nocebo effect. Is much more powerful, and it shows us how powerful we can be. Well, we can believe that we're going to die, and fulfill that prophecy. Or we could say, well, if we can do that, how about we do something, the other way, and say, okay, well, I can create health, I can create vitality, I can change my life around, I can look at things. And you're quite right, it does take action as well. It isn't just that, the mindset, because the way this functioning work, this particular, like the human experience, it requires action as well. So we don't just sit here and or go up a mountain and chant on, and everything is fine. It's thought and action. It's all it's both parts together, and it's getting those aspects in harmony, just like harmonizing the masculine and feminine in each of us. Getting those right, because we've often been steered in different directions, and it's either one way and then say, oh no, that's wrong, and so this pendulum swings right the other way, and it goes too far the other way. And it's
Mhm.
never the, well, how about let's see what we can do in this, um sort of the center part. The center is not um, bland. It's a question of, the harmony of the two, the using intellect and intuition, balancing the two, harmonizing the two, knowing when it's appropriate to use and dive into intuition, when there's other times to use intellect and, that sort of the logical, intuitive side. So yeah, all these, yeah, again, diving off in all sorts of different directions. So
Oh, it's all really good stuff. I was thinking a few minutes ago, why do they never say, let's try to figure out what's right with you, you know, and put a whole placebo spin as opposed to a nocebo spin. Kind of like, a real holistic healthcare provider might say, well, this is what you've got going for you, right? This is where that we can work with this, and we can do these things. And if we do these things based on the literature, based on the studies, there is a reasonable chance that you will either just live a little bit longer, you might live better during that period of time, you could possibly recover. And so let's move in this direction, shall we, and see where things go. But we don't do it that way, right? It's always this death sentence, especially with terminal conditions, right? That's kind of, the definition of what we're talking about. So I've just been really curious how the whole establishment has always been steered in all of these different ways to get people to think in a very specific dead end way. Whether it's gender issues, whether it's politics, religion, any of these issues, there's always this kind of steering of the discussion into one final lane where where there is only kind of destruction and despair and hopelessness associated with it.
The steering people in a particular direction is part of it for me is putting out the message that we can't think for ourselves, can't do it for ourselves. We can't look after our own bodies. We can't look after our own health. We
That's
have
a good.
to defer to others, and treating the body as if it's like a machine that you can just, fix these different parts. And also that if you've got an issue in one part, that it's that part that's wrong, whereas the body's an interconnected system. It's an it's there isn't a it's not a series of parts, and it's not a car. You can't just take a bit out and replace it with a new bit. um, and and that's their model. And if they look at what's right, then there are less opportunities for them to interfere and make suggestions of the kinds of things that they can do to help us. And the idea of looking at what's wrong is I think, to, as I say, to reinforce the idea that we are helpless, and that we have to listen to them, that they're the only ones that can tell us what to do.
Who
So it
can
is that.
save us? We're always looking for
Yes,
somebody to save us, whether it's a
totally.
doctor or the White Hats or, a political leader, whatever. And
Any kind of
it's the
savior.
same script that's been run out. Any kind of savior, any kind of messiah for me. This is like red flag city, because to me, this is all cult behavior. When we get to that point, we are in the world cult. My last book, as you know, was The World Cult and You. And it was a whole meditation on this kind of subject matter, where how the construct utilizes groupthink and cult formation, uses mass traumatization for social engineering and mind control purposes. I mean, it's a very deep rabbit hole. But if you go down it a little ways, you'll begin to see that, my God, this is just how things work here.
Yes, and it's denying our individuality. At the same time, we are social beings, which of course they utilize, and manipulate that sense of, we aren't, um, yes, isolated, which is why they isolated us. Um, the there's a Well, that's the other thing. We're not all the same, and there've been plenty of kind of experiments. They're not really experiments, but plenty of things that have like happened certainly in the 20th century. Various experiments that were conducted to see how people would respond in certain situations. All kinds of different things. I mean, the more famous one, the
Milgram
Milgram.
experiments
Yes,
or
yes.
mm,
And even though and there were plenty of people who were critical of those experiments, and for good reason. At the same time, I think, let's not get lost in the weeds of those discussions and those debates about what was appropriate and what wasn't done and that kind of thing. Let's look at what we can get out of it. One of them is that even though 65% or something like that actually carried out the instructions to the point of causing harm, 35% didn't. So it's not just that, oh, we're 65. I mean, that's worrying enough. At the same time, 35% didn't. So, let's kind of step back and look at this and realize that there are people who, even though there was a man with a clipboard saying, oh, you are required to do this. You need. They had four, because I've looked into. They had four specific points to put across. Like a pressure point. Each time somebody said, I don't think so, or I'm not comfortable, or didn't want to carry on. It said, you are required to carry on, and it became stronger. at each time at each place, and obviously, certain people carried on. So, there was a lot of thought within that to get people to comply, you know, and just because somebody said, you are required. And I mean, part of it is, yes, they were paid, and so maybe because they were paid, they thought, well, I can't refuse because I've been paid. I mean, there are all sorts of different things. And a book I'm reading at the moment, which is looking at some of those experiments, the author did discover that some of the people who took part, or some of the men who took part in those Milgram experiments, wrote letters and said, even though they had participated, it it actually made them think different, or actually made them think about life. It gave them the opportunity to really think about what they were doing, to the point where they became more aware of what was going on. And one even said that because of that, they became a conscientious objector, even though within the experiment they had actually continued to keep turning up the dial to allegedly give an electric shock. And it was a fake machine, so they weren't doing anything, but it really did make people think. So again, just because they participated, there, there's still there were still individual thought processes going on. So, you can say, oh, well, 65% of people will do this. Well, yeah, but not everyone will do that. That there are people who will learn lessons and say, oh, well, hang on a minute, no, I'm not happy with that, even though they were. So there are opportunities for people to learn from these experiences. So we're not all capable of being herded, which is what the wannabe controllers, or what, for want of a better word, what they think they can get us to do. So that fills me with hope, even though a lot of people do follow. So again, we are individuals, and that's where the indoctrination through the schooling system is designed to stop people recognizing that individual spark of something inside us. Yeah, that's not been conditioned out. There are plenty of people who haven't lost that, and so that gives me uh, it's more than hope. Yeah. Sometimes you look at humanity and think, what's going on, certainly in the last few years, and other times, looking at that and thinking, no, there's definitely there's something there. It just needs to be nudged and woken up. It's like give people a bit of a shake.
Yeah, I like that. I don't spend a lot of time these days on the focused on the macro in terms of what's going to happen and will humanity survive and all that kind of thing. I'm really working on things that are within my control. Working on my energy, my consciousness, my life, my creativity. But having said that, the very the very notion that a third of the people in an experiment like that years ago, when people were a lot more I don't know, in that kind of 50s mentality, a lot of these people were that was a bit of a cookie cutter society, and so you would have expected that maybe most of the vast majority of people in those experiments would have just gone through with it because that was the nature of that world, and yet they were asking questions, and a third of them said, no, I'm not going to hurt somebody just because you want me to, or say that I have to. I'm just not going to do it. And so that is cause for some level of optimism that people are not automatically just sheeple, that they can actually, that there's a portion of the population that can think independently and is courageous enough to take action based on that cognition. And we can work with that. That's a starting point. Well, let's determine what's right about us. Well, that's something that's right about a lot of people, that they do have this inclination to think independently. I really address my new book to the free thinkers out there. I don't really care about the other people. They're not the people I'm having the conversation with. They may leave me a bad review or something, but I'm not really interested in that interaction. I'm really interested in having dialogue with people who are working on really opening their minds and hearts. That's where I'm coming from.
Yes, and going back to what you said about, what you're working on is yourself and your own creativity and what you can do and what you can control. And that is exactly the point, that when we do that, and that does then ripple out, because that's the nature of this place. So it is not trying to convince people who aren't interested to put our stuff out, and then we'll find that people are interested, and they will open up, and then you can have interesting conversations and discussions, and recognize that you'll have different views, and to not see that as a point of division, but to see that as a point of growth for both of you. Because when you say, oh, and it's like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. Like I said before, it's like, that's interesting, or well, that's not the way I see it. However, you've got a point there. I'll think about it, instead of saying, oh no, it's a completely different dynamic. And of course, the idea that people are social, and most people are, oh, I don't know, actually, maybe I'll take that back. A lot of people are thoughtful and compassionate, and that was played upon in the 2020, early 2020, 2021, because they were said, oh well, if you do this then you'll hurt somebody else. So you go, well, I've got to do this, otherwise I might hurt somebody else. So
Right.
they were playing on human compassion, but twisted it to something that was completely false. And those of us who knew it was false were then looked down upon as, well, you're the bad people. So
Yeah, we're the
again, it's
people in the Milgram experiments, who are saying, no way, I'm just not doing it.
mm,
And that and therefore there was more and more pressure applied by the minions and controllers to silence, dissent, divide, conquer.
yes, totally. And most of the um, aggression was from um, other people, as opposed to the uh, authorities, if you like. It was, they didn't have to do too much, because um, other people were taking those actions. They were the ones who were saying, you can't come into my shop, or enforcing nonsense
Yeah, I mean, the world suddenly
rules.
filled up with yes men and women. It was just unbelievable. It happened
Totally.
so fast.
Yes, and yes, I mean, I don't know what the percentage was. Like you, I wasn't focusing on too much of those kinds of details. I was um, sharing the information to help those who were listening to not be um, not be forced into making uh, decisions that they would prefer not to make.
Yeah, and possibly regret. And we've
Yes.
seen we've seen a lot of regret, haven't we, in the last couple of years?
Hmm. Yes, and at the same time, I'm also not diving into the, oh well, if anyone's done that, then well, that's it, you're done for. It's like, no,
Yeah,
I
I'm with
don't.
you. I'm totally with you because that really gets back to where are you on the placebo nocebo on the spell casting spectrum, and how are you using the power of your consciousness?
Totally. Totally. And for other people who haven't looked into it properly to be making those kinds of comments, to people who may be um, uh, uncertain, so they may be a little bit more susceptible to that spell casting. Yeah, it's that there's a, yeah, the responsibility, being, yeah, we have responsibility to our fellows, and not to say, um, oh well, you're done for because you did X, Y, because you did that. I don't know, and so it's not for me to make those kind of definitive comments. And I'm convinced by what I've studied, that well, as I say, the body can heal itself, does heal itself, and that's because the body is, if you like, a vessel of consciousness, and so the consciousness piece comes first. And like with Anita Murjani, shift in consciousness can shift what's happening in the body. So I think that we have to be careful. I say we there's a lot in what's called the alternative health community that's almost the same kind of doom and gloom, fear porn stuff that's being put out by the mainstream. So I think that's another divide and conquer issue. It's like, well, it's this or it's that. Well, actually, well, it's not, because there's something else. There are other aspects, and again, it's the taking responsibility for what we can control, as you said quite rightly, and doing our best with those aspects of life and sharing with others who are open to listening, not trying to convince people who are just closed off. Um,
Right.
it's uh, because otherwise you're then, you see, it's about freedom. Because if we're saying, you've got to listen to me, I've got to change your mind, you're then imposing your view on someone else. And if we believe in freedom, then we have the freedom of choice. So do they. So it's not to impose. It's finding that balance and saying, here's something interesting. If they say, don't know what you're talking about, I go, okay, it's not for me to force, to impose, and just say, well, it's yeah, it's the responsibility thing. And it's a it's another one of those, sort of moving one side into the other side, and deciding what to share, how much to share, how to put it across. Again, that's with the writing, how to put it across, so I don't sound like I'm on my soapbox going, yes, you've got to do this, and not saying, oh, they're telling us, scaremongering, oh, fear, just to say, look, this is the nonsense they're talking about. This is what I've found. Now, do you want to live in fear? Because that, of course, is the main controlling emotion, is to get people to be fearful. And then, of course, the thinking capabilities are somewhat toned down, if not switched off, because you just can't think clearly if you're in a state of fear. You're in a panic. Survival comes in, and the survival mode switches on. Thinking doesn't come into it. So that's why they use the fear, and they keep doing it.
And obviously, the ultimate fear is death. I was so aware
Mm.
of that in writing "Get Out of Here Alive." I'm really writing a book about an alternative view of the dying process and what might happen afterwards that is totally not mainstream, deeply metaphysical and esoteric. And my goal was to get people to just begin examining the whole notion of death and all of the dogma surrounding death with fresh eyes, and begin maybe experimenting with ways to use some of this new perspective to improve their lives in the here and now, and to begin pulling away from the areas that are creating fear and other draining emotions that deplete their life force, that lower their ability to think, to cognize independently and accurately. When you can do that, you can live a very different kind of life. Even if the hive mind is buzzing away all around you, you don't have to be part of it. You can literally have a little piece of paradise in the middle of an ocean of chaos. It's possible. It's happened all the time. There are historical instances, if I'm not mistaken, during one of the the biblical destructions of Sodom and Gomorrah or something along those lines. There was this little town, like kind of right there in the blast path, that didn't receive any harm at all.
Mm.
There was. So, I mean, this kind of thing happens on the macro sometimes, and it absolutely happens on the micro. Sometimes I encounter people who are so kind of in their little world, they don't even know what's going on, and they're as happy as can be. And I'm like, good on you. That's really laudable. I don't care what anybody says or what judgment would be brought to bear on you by people who think they know better. If they're not as happy as this person, if they're not as fulfilled, are they smarter? Are they wiser?
Absolutely brilliant point. Yes, and it's that's why fear is used, and certainly fear of death, and that's why the whole medical system is designed around, oh, we've got to prevent death, stop you dying, oh, because all these like dying numbers, so everyone's scared of dying, and so they're so scared of dying they don't actually live, to be um, and that's the difference to say, and actually no, I mean, whatever death is, it's not, I'm convinced it's not what we're given the impression it is, and certainly not for people who are materialists. They think, oh, well, this is all there is, and that's it. It's gone, it's finished. Um, I, I, I accept that that's a particular point of view. It's not one I subscribe to, because when you know that there is a greater consciousness, whatever that is, that we are connected to, that is uh, who we truly are, and so this is a temporary type of existence, and so we are um, more than this and beyond this. At the same time, that's not saying this is an unimportant experience. And again, looking at people who've had near-death experiences, what their impressions are of that, and even people out of body, that there's something that can detach from the body, see the body, and recognize that it's not all they are. And so, I mean, when I was looking into the nature of reality, I was like over 20 years ago, something like that. Within some of the material I was looking at and researching and studying was this phrase, and I mean, it stuck with me because at the time it just was the light bulb moment that said, "You're as dead now as you're ever going to be."
Hmm. Hmm.
And that was so liberating for me. That was such, as I say, the real light bulb. We go, it was something I'd almost sensed without knowing the words, if you like, that there is more to us than this, and so this is a type of experience, but it's not all there is, and so there's always more. And yeah, absolutely, live to the fullest and not allow yourself to get drawn into what's going around. Yeah, and I think more and more people are moving in that direction, despite all the nonsense of trying to pull us into the false dichotomies of whatever it is. Certainly in the political arena, and in the States, of course, with what's been going on. I mean, there's nonsense here as well. In England, it's crazy, and how all these discussions are, given that there are two views, and so these are this, debate points, argument points, whatever they are, and like you say, to say, well, how is that going to help me to get drawn into that? What can I do about it? And to say, okay, well, I'll think for myself, work it out for myself, and make my own choices. So yeah, I mean, that's why your Get Out of Here Alive is just so exciting, because it's helping people practically. It gives people practical ways of as well as the ideas of how to get there, and then what to do. So yeah, yeah. But again, I mean, very intriguing. Have you had lots of good feedback from that? Because I know it's been published now nearly a week, hasn't it, since it
You're
was
right,
published?
right. Well, this really great writer, Dawn Lester, left a nice review.
Oh,
Uh,
oh, how can
I
I not? It's so exciting. It's an amazing book.
No, I've had tremendously positive feedback. I'm still waiting for some of the review numbers to catch up over on Amazon. So people haven't posted as many reviews there as like on Goodreads, for example. So there's a little bit of, because also you have so many different Amazons, UK, Canada, that kind of thing. So people can only really post in one, is my understanding. So, but yeah, the book hit #1 in energy healing bestseller on US Amazon. So that was really cool. And #2 in alchemy, and then fairly high in another category. So I was really happy with that. So I can say I have a #1 Amazon bestseller at this point in time, for whatever that means, and for, if that's even worth anything. It's really probably not, but I'll take it. So that was really, really good. And I'm in the process of getting the paperback together. I'm hoping that's going to be out within like a week or so, or maybe not quite so soon, but I put in an order for the galley copy today to be sent to us. So we're going to look at that and make sure it's as it should be. And then I'm also narrating the audiobook and serializing that on Substack. So it's done. I'm just in the process of serializing it. So people can go to solluckman.substack.com and hear me reading, the different chapters. I think I have the preface, introduction, chapter 1 and chapter 2 up as of now, and I'll be posting the next chapter, within the next several days.
Excellent. And I'm glad you're reading it yourself too. That's, I don't know, I think that adds the extra magic because because it's your book and you're putting it
I
across
was in
in.
denial for a long time, Don. I didn't want to do it, but because I'm
I
not a
know.
professional reader and that kind of thing. But, and someone came forward early on and who had some experience and really wanted to read it, who had read the book and loved it and just wanted to, participate in that way. And I gave that some consideration, and then this little voice in me was like, you really need to read. If you don't read anything else, you need to read this one. This is the book that you need to read. So I ultimately decided to do it, and I'm glad I did it, even though, like I said, I'm not a professional reader, and I'm a little bit histrionic at times in the way the way I present the material. But you get some personality. It's not a dry read. Let's just say
That's the point, that it's yours, and so you'll put you into it, so it's not just somebody reading it. It's because it is yours. And I'm really looking forward to the paperback because I do prefer real books. I mean, that's I've only got a few that you can see there. I I, I do prefer real books, so I look forward to that coming out. So that's
Well,
very exciting.
I appreciate that. I really do. I wanted to give you a chance before we close out here to maybe give listeners a glimpse into future writings, books, projects, events, whatever you've got coming down the line here.
In terms of events, I'm going to be in Texas at Confluence in May, between the 7th and 12th of May. If people are interested, confluenceevent.com. That's where a lot of the, truly like-minded people, different individuals, talking about a range of different topics so they're speaking. And there'll be a lot of workshops as well this time. I'm running a workshop. Um, so that's at Sovereignty Ranch in Texas. So as I say, confluenceevent.com. Really looking forward to that. There are some other events coming up later in the year that one in September in England this time. We're actually putting on a weekend event for a few different speakers in Sussex. In terms of writing, my Substack is pretty sporadic. It's when I feel inspired.
Right.
Something just says no to write about. Sometimes I look in it and think, oh, I should, and just look and it doesn't speak to me. So I, like I was saying with the intuition, I have to be in the right place. It has to say something, and I have to have that inspiration to write. Um, so I'm not regular, and although I think usually there's something like 3 or 4 a month, 3 or 4 articles, and then if I'm helping promote something else, so again some of my articles are promoting the things like the events like Confluence, or as I said at the beginning, my good friend Adrian's call, the call, the webinar call he's got, which is the second one, so that's on the 31st. I I have books, a couple of book ideas. I originally had one that I was contemplating, and then I was having some other ideas, and then I realized it's probably two ideas, and it's a question of which one I tackle first. The one that really draws me is looking at the psychology aspect, and how we can we can be controlled. And because I always look at it from the perspective of what we can do, is to then say, right, okay, well, now you know what can be done. This is what you can do to take responsibility, to take the control back, so we can take responsibility for what we're doing. And because that, as I was saying before, that then ripples out what we do, what we put out into the world, does ripple out.
I like that.
The self-fulfilling prophecy. So yes, and that might take a little while, because there's some research that will go into that to put that together. That's the piece that is feeling more exciting. Only it's, as I say, it's going to take a while, so I'm not sure how long that will be before that one comes out. The other idea was to put some to compile a collection of Substack articles, so that they're then, again, we don't know what may happen to Substack, so to not lose them, as it were. So to put them in a book in some ways, as like a compilation of, not so it's not like a copy of What Really Makes You Really. It'll be different from that. It'll be sort of a compilation of
Yeah, that would
so
be, I mean, that may be just something prudent to do just for posterity.
that's the idea, yes. And again, because Substack seems to be a good place to write freely and express ourselves freely at the moment.
Right, right.
I'm not saying, I'm not, saying, oh, it's controlled, it's going to be. I don't mean that at all. But like you say, who knows what's going to happen? And so that material is then available, yeah, for posterity. Yes, no, that's kind of where I was thinking. So that's
And
two
that
ideas.
project wouldn't necessarily be a massive undertaking because most of that material is available. It's written.
Yes, it just needs to be adapted and edited and collated. Yes.
Nice. Well, I'm very curious to see where you go with both of those projects, and please reach out to me when you get to the pre-pub phase, and we can do another chat, and I can help you. You know, not that you need it, but if you want it, I'd be more than happy to assist you, like you have with me so generously, in getting my book in front of people.
Oh, absolute. Thank you very much. I mean, absolute pleasure helping you get your work out. I know we have some differences, but a lot of similarities in where we are, and what our aims are, I suppose, our principles, our thoughts, our ideas. There's a lot of overlap, and differences at the same time. And I love your writing. It's and certainly the fiction, yes, with Callie and with Snooze. Yeah, good books.
Wow, that's very sweet of you. Very, very sweet. Well, Dawn, this has been a pleasure. I'm glad you could make time for me today, and I look forward to sharing this discussion. I think people will get a lot out of it, frankly, because we went into some very intriguing and potentially empowering territory.
Yes, thank you. And that's I kind of my aim is to help people empower themselves. It's not to do it for them. It's to say, yeah, um, help them empower themselves. So yeah, that's my objective really. So, and thank you very much. It's been a fantastic conversation. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, you were great. Thank you so much once again, and I look forward to our next chat.
Me too. Thank you.